Hi there, this is Eshu. I'm the abbot here at Zenwest Buddhist Society. This Living Zen-podcast is just one of the many resources we've created at Zenwest to make Zen practice and training more available and accessible to people all over the world. Instructional videos, printable resources, and much, much more are also available on our website at www.zenwest.ca. If you're a regular listener, I'd love to hear from you. So please drop me an email at office@zenwest.ca and let me know who you are, how you got started, and what brought you to Zen. Everything we make available in person and online at Zenwest is only possible because of the support of our members and associates, people like you. If the efforts of our community are making a difference in your life, I'd like to invite you to show your support and take part in making it happen by becoming an associate or member of the Zenwest Sangha. You can do this by clicking the Join Us tab on our website at www.zenwest.ca. Thank you for your support, and thanks for listening. Continuing our investigation into the gateless barrier, Case 16, Yunmen, the sound of the bell. Yunmen said, "The world is vast and wide. Why do you put on your 7-piece robe at the sound of the bell?" Wumen says, "All you Zen students training in the way, don't be victimized by sounds. Don't follow up on forms. You may have realization on hearing sounds or awakening on seeing a form. That's natural. But don't you know that true Zen students can ride sounds and veil forms? They see all and sundry clearly. They handle each and everything deftly. Perhaps you are such a person. But tell me, does the sound come to the ear, or does the ear go to the sound? If you have transcended sound and silence, what do you say at such a point? If you listen with your ear, it is hard to understand. If you hear with your eye, you are intimate at last." Wumen's verse says, "With realization, all things are one family. Without realization, all things are disconnected. Without realization, all things are one family. With realization, all things are disconnected." 3 bells, please. This morning, as we were going through the chanting, I had this whole, I don't know if it's because it's the festive season or what, but I had this whole idea for the Zenwest choir in 2015, just having a group of people that meets to engage in chanting for the sake of chanting, because it is it is a very powerful practice that I think many people in Zen, myself included, particularly when you first come into Zen, it's this really unwieldy, religious, bizarre sort of thing that we do that we wish we didn't have to do. And when I do these surveys for feedback from members, sometimes chanting comes off, people are like, "God, I wish we didn't have to do all that chanting." I used to feel the same way when I first came into practice. But now, after 20 years or so of practice, my feeling about chanting is that it is, the value in it is in expression. Because it's one place that we actually get to come together to express our depth of practice together. When we chant together, it's really saying, like, let's have the rubber hit the road. The the awareness, the mindfulness of the sounds, the harmony of working with a collective group of people with varying voices and varying skills, managing material objects for some people, the drum and the bell. And so it's actually really hard. And it's totally impossible to continue gibbering in your mind while there's chanting going on if you want to stay with the chanting. So it's a challenging practice. So I was sitting here thinking, oh gosh, that would be great to have a chanting choir. Then during the lead up to the Dharma talk, these introductory chants, some other thoughts came up. One of them was that chanting is something that we again really dismiss or diminish in its value in our practice. One of my Dharma brothers, Joriki Osho, was talking to me about the practice that they did at the Zen Study Society, which is the main monastery is Dai Bosatsu in New York. And he said that before you were ordained, you had to know the sutras, off book, solo. And this wasn't just like, you should know these. It was actually, you come into a room with one of the senior monks and you recite the sutras, the chants. And in Dai Bosatsu, they're all in Japanese. And some of them, like the Lotus Sutra, for example, are more than a dozen pages long. And it's all Japanese characters. And so you've got to sit there and recite the whole chant book. Now I've always thought that, this is really over the top and kind of gets to the point where it's like, oh my God, really? Like, someone wants to be ordained and you're going to say no because they lack the memory capacity. But on the other hand, I think that particularly in certain roles in the Zendo, like if you're the chant leader, it's good to know the chants, and we should really make an effort. And certainly not, there's not going to be any consequences for people who don't know the chants. But if you're the Dentsu, you should be the most stable person in the room as far as chanting goes. So that if all of the other voices fail, at the very least, the Dentsu is running like a spine, just nice and solid. So for anyone considering the Dentsu position, really try to settle in and get to know those chants. We have this practice and we chant. Every time we get together we chant, but it's definitely one of the practices that I know that people don't do at home. There's a rare person who has any kind of chanting practice as part of their daily home practice, in spite of our producing recordings and making textbooks available. It's difficult, challenging, uncomfortable. And in Zen practice, that's always a good sign. Today's case 16, Yunmen. Yunmen's sound of the bell. Yunmen we met just previously, might have been, the previous case, Dongshan 60 blows. Where have you come from? I spare you 60 blows, right? This was Yunmen. So Yunmen again. Yunmen who, a whole school of Zen came out of Yunmen. It eventually broke apart and was absorbed by the other major schools. But the voice of Yunmen was strong enough that a whole school existed for a while. So his teachings should never be sort of dismissed lightly. This case is wonderful because it so deftly points to a core principle of our practice. Something that we should all aspire to clarify and manifest in our own lives. So, Yunmen said, "The world is vast and wide. Why do you put on your 7-piece robe at the sound of the bell?" So to put this in context, of course, Yunmen is talking to a community of monastic practitioners. When he's talking about the 7-piece robe, I'm wearing one. So let's see if I can hold this up so you can see. This is called a kesa. And so 7-piece or 7 stripes is what it's talking about. So each of it is made of these patches, right? So this is considered 1 stripe, 2 stripes, 3 stripes, so on. So 7. The patchwork 7-stripe robe is the kesaya in Sanskrit, the robe of a monk. So he's asking these monks at the sound of the bell, and what he's talking about is the wake-up bell in the morning. So when you wake up in the morning, he says to his monks, when the bell goes off, why do you put on the 7-piece robe? And this isn't a question about monastic form. It's not about, why in the monastic schedule do we first start by putting on our robe? It's really a question about clarifying how you are manifesting in this life. What are you doing and why? Why? Recently the talks that I've been giving have, and perhaps always, focus on these 2 mutually opposing, simultaneously active activities in the cosmos. Yunmen characterizes them or gives them life in 2 simple statements. The first is this absolute aspect. The world is vast and wide. This is a statement about the capacity or the vastness of our realization. And I hope that as we continue our practice, this simple statement, the world is vast and wide, not only this world, but yourself, being of a nature that is not different from this world. Our capacity is vast and wide. I talk about this over and over again. Our potential, our capacity as human beings is limitless, both for the benefit of all beings, as well as creating suffering in the world. Our capacity is boundless. And when we multiply that by every being, and we recognize that each of these is not separate, then we begin to feel this vastness. And in our practice, we can begin to deeply immerse ourselves in this vastness. So this is wonderful. And we can sort of bask there in our meditation, bask in the vastness, completely dissolved in the vastness of the cosmos, the limitless potentiality. And many people, when they do meditation practice or when they come to Zen practice, they think this is what meditation is all about, is this basking in vastness. Over the years of practice, I've seen all kinds of people who have placed a huge amount of emphasis on this side of practice, the vast world, vast and wide. And I've seen machines that have been developed that you can stick onto your head and gives you brain wave feedback, and they map out what the brain is doing when you're in this state of vastness. And they can, through voice and physical manipulation and repetition, they can help to more quickly attain or arrive in this deep equanimity, this deep state of immersion in the vastness. These are a person who fixates on this, or a person who becomes overly involved in that, is always upset when the bell rings for walking meditation. I was just getting deep into my meditation. And part of the reason that we do this in Zen meditation is because we recognize that our awakening, our realization, has two aspects. One is this absolute immersion, but we can't get lost in it. Awakening is also the manifestation of the wisdom that arises through that dissolution. So the bell rings and the clappers sound, and we have to take on a body again, this body, whatever shape it's in, whatever size it is, whatever its age is, we take on this body that we have connected with. And we have to go out into the world. We have to do our walking meditation in formal practice, or chanting if it's time to do chanting, or bowing if it's time to do bowing. And for these monks who are being questioned by Yunmen, at the sound of the bell in the morning, it's time to put on their 7-piece robe, go down to the chanting hall, begin the day of practice. And Yunmen says, why? Why, in all the world, all the things that you could be doing with your life, why are we here doing this practice on a Sunday morning in December, coming close to the holiday season, with so many things on your to-do list? Why do you come here to do Zen practice? Wumen says, all of you Zen students training in the way, don't be victimized by sounds. Don't follow up on forms. You may have realization on hearing sounds or awakening on seeing a form. That's natural. Okay, so victimized by sounds. Sometimes in the Zendo I'll give a shout, and some people really jump. Or some people, if you hear a pleasant sound, I talk about this, if you hear a bird, or you hear a siren, or you hear tires squealing, or a Harley in the parking lot, or something like that, those sounds can impact our meditation at times. A baby crying is a great one. We are sitting, the dog is whining, the baby is crying, the chainsaw is going outside. And our experience of our experience, because we're sitting, the experience of our whole life is changed by the hearing of that sound. If it's a sound that we like, then our whole world becomes a positive place. And if it's a sound that we don't particularly like, then our whole world becomes one of suffering. The sound changes, the sound goes away, and our experience of our whole existence, our whole life, is manipulated by our external environment. And I hope that everybody here has also had the experience of being solidly grounded in their practice, solidly grounded in the meditation that they're doing. Sometimes I shout, and the sound just cuts right through. It doesn't rattle the foundation. It doesn't move you. There's just this sound that passes through. You're aware of it, but it doesn't spin you around. Likewise, as we sit, there are times when we'll hear a bird or a chainsaw or a car squealing or a baby crying. And they're just sounds in the world. We hear them. We can even identify them. But we're not manipulated by them. Our fundamental experience is one of groundedness, of immersion in the whole. We're not disconnected because we can still hear it. We can still identify it. But we're not being spun by it. Wumen says, don't you know? Well, first of all, he says, you may have realization on hearing sounds or awakening on seeing a form. And this is true. There are times where that shock of finding yourself suddenly in the space where the shout happened or the clap happened, it's profoundly opening. Wow. Or sometimes you come out of the zendo during a retreat and there's a tree or a flower or the open sky or a bird. And suddenly the vastness of this cosmos or the intimacy of relationships strikes you profoundly. These things are natural. But don't you know that the true Zen students can ride sounds and veil forms? That we can, as we deepen in our practice, we begin to realize that all of these things, these sounds and these forms, they're manifestations of this vast cosmos. They're manifestations of our own true mind. I always talk about a great Zen teacher as being something which is truly terrifying, because you never know what you're going to encounter when you go into the room. They should be consummate actors. Not in the sense of play acting, pretending, but in the sense that they're shapeshifters. That in a moment's notice they can utilize any aspect to engage with you, to meet with you. They create any sound to stimulate, to strike, to move you, to test you, to challenge you. But it's not just Zen masters who are like this. It's us. We do it all the time. When we're dealing with our kids, when we're dealing with difficult situations, when we're training our animals, if we want to demonstrate that something is not acceptable or could be dangerous for our children or for our pets, no! You gotta put a big face on. You gotta make a loud noise. If you just say, now Johnny, that's really dangerous and unacceptable. That we're communicating with words, with just the ear, voice to ear. And maybe in a really, really, really rare exception, that might work. But when we utilize all of the skills that we have, our message gets across much more strongly. And this is one of the things that's really difficult sometimes about teaching Zen, is that as a teacher you have to really use all of these skills. As a parent, likewise, you have to use all of these skills. My son's always talking to me about how I can seem really mad one minute and then the next minute I'm not mad at all. And I say, well, that's because I wasn't mad in the first place. But you sometimes don't respond unless I'm mad. So, I need to be mad. Each of us has this capacity, 1,000 masks, 1,000 characters. The problem that we can run into is that when we invest ourselves into one of those characters and believe that that character is who we truly are. We have to continuously step out of those characters. We have to continually return to our source so that we can manifest clearly over and over and over again. Don't you know that true Zen students can ride sounds and veil forms? Always using the sounds, always using the forms to point to this origin, this nature. They see all and sundry clearly. They handle each and everything deftly. That's an aspiration, I think. I think all of the Zen students that I know, including myself and including some very great teachers, the greatest of them handle many things deftly. But everybody drops the ball from time to time. Perhaps you are such a person, but tell me, does the sound come to the ear or does the ear go to the sound? If you have transcended sound and silence, what do you say at such a point? We have to recognize that the relationship that we have with this cosmos is intimate. The things that are happening in our lives aren't just an external force that is happening to us. In every activity and in every circumstance, we are intimately involved. We are an acting and active part of the equation. This next part, if you listen with your ear, it is hard to understand. If you hear with your eye, you are intimate at last. Whenever you hear the term I, or the word I in a Dharma context, you always have to sort of think about this as the Dharma eye. The eye that sees things clearly, the eye that sees the underlying activity. We have sayings like this in, contemporary Western speech as well. We'll say something like, listen with your heart. When someone's speaking to us, if we're just listening to their words, we know this. There's lots of research about this. If we listen to just the language, or we take the words that the person's saying and we write them down and we try to understand what a person's trying to get across, just that way, we'll miss the point entirely. But it's not just when people are talking that this is the case. Every circumstance that we come into, every environment, every interaction, every relationship that we come into, we are intimately interacting with every aspect. All of our senses, our hearts and our minds, all of it. And our practice in Zen is to respond appropriately with what we're intimately involved with. There's no formula for that. There's no instruction for that. There's no roadmap or guideline for that. In Zen practice, the fundamental underlying principle is that because we are intimately connected, because we are one with all things in the vast cosmos, in this vast cosmos, there's nothing lacking. There's nothing missing. There's no capacity that we are deficient in. So, we don't go into circumstances with the plan already written in stone. We approach each circumstance spontaneously with trust in our own capacity, with trust in our ability to meet it wholeheartedly. And this to do this is one of the greatest challenges, I think. I think in each of us, this tendency to think of ourselves as inadequate, incomplete, or somehow deficient is so strong that we face most of our lives and most of our circumstances with a huge amount of fear, anxiety, and aversion. We avoid many, many circumstances because we just feel like we can't handle it. We don't have what it takes. We can't do it. So this teaching in Zen practice that just as you are, you're complete. Just as you are, you have the capacity to meet any circumstance is a radical, revolutionary perspective. But we can't just grasp that wholesale. That's a very difficult thing to do. And in a lot of ways, we're not asked to grasp it wholesale. But what we can do is little bit by little bit in our own lives, in our own experience, we can try. These in small ways and large ways, our Zen practice presses these challenges in front of us over and over and over again. When we begin to engage in intensive practice, waves and waves and waves of I can't make it, I can't do it, I'm not up to it, I'm not good enough, I'm not cut out for this, come up over and over and over again. And if we're in a supportive community, if we've got a supportive teacher, supportive friends, and a strong practice, we can find that those waves coming in, we just sit straight through them. And then we start to have for ourselves evidence. We start to find strength for ourselves in our activities. We start to find that circumstances arise that we meet. We don't think about meeting them. We don't trouble with them when they arise. Circumstances arise and we meet them. And then looking back, we say, how did I do that? Or, geez, that's really weird because I usually wouldn't be able to do that, or I wouldn't think that I'd have what it took to meet that. As we continue in our practice, I think that we start to question. I think it's really natural to start to question what it is that we're doing with our lives, why we're doing the things that we're doing. And sometimes in practice, we question every aspect of our lives. Relationships, jobs, places that we live, our diets, our physical activity, like every aspect comes under the microscope. And what we find is that there are innumerable places in our lives where why we're doing the things that we're doing has nothing to do with meeting the demands of the circumstance. Pleasing this person, fulfilling that sense of obligation, because it's what we were told we should do, because it's what everybody else is doing. And as we continue our practice, as we become more and more immersed in our relationship with this cosmos, those reasons become less and less acceptable, less and less valid, less and less motivating to do the things that we're doing with our lives, to be spending our energy, our life energy, doing things for those reasons makes less and less sense. What starts to make more sense to us is meeting this circumstance, whatever this circumstance is that's arising in front of us, as a manifestation of the cosmic activity acting through this body. Profound wisdom, profound strength, courage, compassion, kindness, all manifest when we act, when we arise, when we are born from this space. If you listen with your ear, it is hard to understand. If you hear with your eye, you are intimate at last. With realization, all things are one family. Without realization, all things are disconnected. Without realization, all things are one family. With realization, all things are disconnected. We can say that in the first part, with realization, all things are one family. In the absolute sense, we can recognize that we are one. All things in this vast cosmos are one. Without realization, when we look around, we just see a bunch of objects haphazardly bashing into one another, and it's sort of every man, every person for themselves. Without realization, all things are one family. Wumen just flips it around on its head, because from a disconnected place, we can say that everything is the same, which is not the same as saying that we are all one. And it says, the last line, with realization, all things are disconnected. When we truly grasp one true nature, when we truly grasp our common origin, then as this cosmos, as our world, as each individual that we meet arises, each flower and each tree and each stone and each car and each coat and each pair of boots and each scarf and each hat, when we're able to hold our common origin, then each of these precious manifestations can be seen in its distinct uniqueness. But we don't lose. We don't feel inadequate. We don't give rise to craving because there's something different, because there's something unique, because there's something manifesting which is somehow differentiated. Again, holding these two mutually opposing and simultaneously acting activities. So, at the sound of the bell, when your alarm clock goes off in the morning, for these monks, Yunmen asked, why do you put on your 7-piece robe at the sound of the bell? For each of us, as we go through our lives, in the morning when our alarm clock goes off, or when we wake up, when the telephone rings, this is always a good question to ask ourselves. Why? Why? When these things happen, why are we responding in the way that we're responding? Are we responding as robots, creatures of habit? Are we responding as the children of our parents, as trained beasts? Or are we responding as bodhisattvas, beings of awakening? When a sound is heard, do we respond like one of Pavlov's dogs? Or do we meet it dynamically, spontaneously, with all that we have to offer?
Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.